as I've said multiple times in the last 26 years, I was born in Traverse City, Michigan. I went to school in the town of Elk Rapids, and I lived over by Torch Lake. So I know a thing or two about northern Michigan. When I was a young boy, the only time I ever saw northern Michigan in the national news was when there was somebody who spotted something called a crabbit. It apparently was a half cat and half rabbit hopping around the woods, and I remembered it faintly. It looked like it had both the characteristics of a cat and a rabbit. And what had happened was 9 and 10 in northern Michigan, they submitted it to the CBS Evening News and it became the last story of the night. And it was the only time it's like Detroit made the news because of, all the fires that happened on Devil's Night, or the car industry. New York made the news. Chicago made the news. Traverse City, well, the top story today is that a flower blossom by the side of the road. And today, things are a little different, because Traverse City is in the news all the time, and not for the best reasons, or northern Michigan in that particular. A couple of years ago, it was the tornado in Gaylord. Ripped out a bunch of buildings on the west side of town. As a matter of fact, it destroyed the Hobby Lobby. Yes, an entire Hobby Lobby was destroyed, which, by the way, used to be a Walmart. That's a fun fact for you. Walmart decided they wanted to upgrade to a full-blown super center, so they were like, yeah, this is a little bit too small. So, anyway, it's been a couple of years. I would imagine by now that part of town has been remodeled and rebuilt. And, of course, there was the horrific incident that involved the pandemic and Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Whitmer in her family had a home outside of Elk Rapids, where I went to school. And I also lived, for a little while too. And what happened was a group of assholes wanted they were caught in a conversation about wanting to kidnap the governor, take her across state lines, and holding her in a kangaroo court and murdering her. Now, I guess, I remember that some of those folks were not guilty for what they did. It's how fucked up our justice system is. It's like these dipshits, it's like, we were just joking about it. And Donald Trump, what he's doing is he's like, oh, these are good American patriots. Yeah. Patriot my ass. So, but now, of course, they also wanted to blow up the Elk Rapids Bridge. Elk Rapids is a bridge that connects, because, Elk Rapids is a town that's surrounded by 3 lakes. And, it's kind of a, weird town, because it's like, it's it's a small town. It only has 1,600 people. But yeah, if the bridge were to disappear, that meant that, people would have to drive through downtown and then make a go through a loop that would go, so they would have to turn at Ames Street if they were coming from Traverse City and driving up to like Torch Lake or Charlevoix or anywhere northward. So now Traverse City is in the news again. 11 people were injured when a man walked into the Walmart in Traverse City and hacked 11 people with a 3.5-inch pocket knife. Later on, he was confronted in the parking lot by a group of people. One person who was identified as Derek Perry confronted the man who threw his weapon, and soon the cops were there. They arrested the man, and just yesterday he was charged with 11 counts of attempted murder and terrorism. So we are now knowing a lot more about the perpetrator. He was a 42-year-old man named Bradford James Gille. Bradford, now they were originally saying that he was from a town called Afton, which is a tiny town just east, near the tip of the Mitt here in Michigan. It's just east of a town called Indian River. Indian River is just a small dot on the map. I mean, it is populated enough to have a McDonald's, which, by the way, burnt down a few weeks ago. Yeah. Allegedly, it was a grease fire. Overnight grease fire. So anyway, what happened was, this McDonald's was attached to a Shell gas station. And, it totally burnt down. Of course, the building was really old, too. So, anyway, the rest of the story kind of goes like this. So, allegedly, he was living in this town called Afton. But records have shown that he was actually homeless and that he was wanted in Emmett County, which is where Petoskey is. So, allegedly, what this Gille guy was doing was, this guy had a rap sheet. Big time. He was accused, he had controlled substances, he was abusing people, and just today it was discovered that the guy had dug up graves and had sex with dead people. I'm like, what the fuck? And he was caught doing it, many years ago. So this guy had multiple problems throughout his entire life. So anyway, one person who was a close friend of Bradford's, her name was Mikal Doak. She wrote this post on Facebook, and it says here, I'm getting on my soapbox for once. Just like all my other Pelston classmates, I am shocked to see this news coming out of Traverse City today. This also saddens me beyond belief for the victims, but also for BJ himself. BJ Gille was my friend many years ago, and so many bad things have happened leading up to this point, and it all could have been prevented. BJ moved to Pelston when we were in 4th grade from California. He sounded like a surfer. Everyone called him California Boy for at least the first year. Every girl had a crush on him. He quickly became a part of our friend group. Now, in middle school and high school, back in the 90s at least, you were allowed to leave for something called open campus lunch. And what that essentially meant was how much trouble you could get into in that half hour you had for lunch around town before coming back to school. A lot of weed, alcohol, cigarettes, etc. where the current antique store stands. So what this girl is saying, so this is what she's talking about. There's an antique store in downtown Pellston. Now, Pellston does not have much of a downtown. It's a bunch of old buildings on one side of the street because I guess there was a massive fire in Pellston, you know, many years ago. Back like 1930s or so, and it wiped out half the town. Yeah, Alanson, which is just south of Pellston, is kind of like that. It's like everything's on one side of the street. And I don't know. And I don't know why in Lanson's case, why it's like that. But Pellston, yeah, there was a major fire a long time ago. And it wiped out half the town. And so there's not many building, you know, I remember Kalkaska's like that too. Kalkaska by Traverse City. There was a major fire in like 1909, and so it's like all of downtown Kalkaska's on one side of the street, and the other side is like, you know, slim pickings, is, you know, although I guess there was a bank, and I guess there's a huge hardware store and all that good stuff. But anyway, back to Pellston. So downtown Pellston, right now they had got this, you know, she was referring to this antique shop. Now what happened was back in the 1990s, up until I'd say about 25 years ago, that was now an antique shop, used to be the town grocery store called, ironically, B&J Market. And it was once an IGA store. I've actually been inside that store when it was a supermarket. Well, I wouldn't even call it a supermarket at that, because it was more of, you know, because I think in Pellston's situation, once upon a time, the town gas station was Cook Hardware. And B&J was the town place in town where you got the basics: milk, bread, cigarettes, booze, etc. And then what happened was, so the story was, B&J Market, I think, became like a stationery shop of all things. You know, I guess the owner said, yeah, we're not going to sell groceries anymore. We're going to start selling, stationary goods, because, yeah, it was a really run-down grocery store when I went there when I was a kid. It was, I mean, the place was nasty. I even remembered, you know, the shopping, you know, the aisles were very narrow, and the place was just felt cold. It just had a cold feel to it because it was such an old store, and it was so dark in there. And the aisles were narrow, and the shopping carts in there even had a sign that said something like, "I assure you, they're clean, they work," or something like that. But not to worry, though. You know, somebody actually opened up another grocery store in Pellston called Pellston General Store, which is still there today. They are actually supplied by Spartan Nash. So, anyway, all's good. Anyway, back to this girl's story. This was when BJ found out the hard way that he was actually allergic to weed. But that did not stop him from smoking it every single day at lunchtime. It became a running joke, and he saw it as an obstacle to be overcome. One day, BJ went with two of his friends at lunchtime to go smoke their weed. I still remember exactly who those two quote-unquote friends were, as many, I'm sure many others do as well. They clam-baked him in a car and locked him inside of it. And, by the way, clam-baking is when you go in, so it basically what they did was the place just, you know, got too smoky. And anyway, rest of the story here. Well, there was some stronger stuff than weed in the car that day, and BJ was so messed up that he couldn't figure out how to get himself out of that old car. None of us knew at the time, though. It didn't come out until days later. All we knew was he didn't come back after lunch, but the other two did, giggling. No one thought much of the prank. The next day, I was in English class, and our teacher came in and told us that BJ did not come home the night before and was missing, and did anyone have any information? We all looked at his one quote-unquote friend in the class, who then went down to the office to tell BJ's dad where he could find his son. BJ was still alive, but barely. The drugs had messed up his system so bad that he would never lead a normal life again. His brain was forever damaged. They took him away to the hospital, and he didn't return when I was a student there. He essentially had to be taken care of inside of a mental health institution for the rest of his life, or he should have been. BJ has been my worst case scenario story for years, and I tell people and my own kids and my own students to never do hard drugs. A story of woe that others should heed so that they do not end up like him. This was back when Lockwood existed in Petoskey. Well, that has since closed down. There used to be similar places in Marquette, Newberry, Traverse City, and even special homes where people with major mental health challenges could go and be safe. All of them have closed since then. All of them. Do you want to know what they did with the patients? For the most part, they just opened the doors and let them walk out. Quote unquote, discharged. Feel free to refer to the Upper Peninsula Sheriff's... Hold on a second, I just lost my place here. Feel free to refer to the Upper Peninsula Sheriff's post from a few years ago for more information. The closest place to send people now is Wisconsin, I believe. The last time I saw BJ was around 15 years ago. He was walking down the sidewalk in downtown Petoskey. I was so excited to see him. I even crossed the road calling out to him to get his attention. I tried to walk to him for a few minutes. He didn't know who I was anymore. He was paranoid and afraid. He didn't really know who he was or where he was. He couldn't really form a coherent sentence. Think fear and loathing in Las Vegas style. When I realized that he was mentally in a completely different reality, I told him bye and let him continue walking. It was a sad moment. There was a woman from one of the shops outside there, and she told me that he used to live in a group home for men in Petoskey where they had in-home care and so on, but that it had closed. She thought that he had been living on the streets for a while, as she always saw him walking around with the same clothes and backpack. She said a lot of people had tried to help him, had tried to talk to him or help him, but he refused to. But he would speak gibberish or run away or refuse to help in those short moments of clarity. That was the last time I saw him in person. It seems that he had been living in the Pines in TC for a while. He should have been in a hospital where he could have gotten the care he deserved. It has been years, decades for him without receiving appropriate mental health care. Turns out they closed the Pines in May of this year. So all of these adults were just roaming Traverse City homeless. Most likely all of them need medical care and mental health care. To quote Thomas More, you first make thieves and then you punish them. Everything that has happened is a horrible tragedy for the victims, for the people that were there, for the families. But I will tell you this, BJ Gille was this great boy that I knew years ago, and everything that has happened to him has been a horrible example of our society failing people with mental health issues. I do not know who he was anymore. I do not condone what he did. It is horrible, but I will say that he is not a terrorist. He is a confused adult that was once my friend that has been kicked down from time to time again in his life. Yes, if you do the crime, you must do the time, but label it correctly. He is not a terrorist. He is probably has no idea what he did or he is or who he is. Take the responsibility for the problem that society has created. And you know what? She's right. Mikhail Doak is right. And, you know, when I read her little statement, I'm like, you know, there were some folks out there who decided to say some shit about her and yada, yada, yada. But here's the point, folks. She is 100% right. I shouldn't say 110%. But she is 100% right. This guy, you know, it's like we shouldn't jump to conclusions. I mean, this guy probably didn't decide to just go out and stab people. I mean, it's like you look at his records and it's like he's bounced around from town to town and wherever. And, yeah, I've looked at his records. I mean, yes, he's lived in Afton, but apparently he's also lived in Rogers City and even in, yes, Traverse City. And, the sad situation is Traverse City is a town that has long, that used to have a mental hospital a long time ago. It was the state hospital, but they closed that down. Guess what happened? Back in the 80s, Ronald Reagan decided to shut down all the mental health places, all the mental hospitals. And they just simply opened the door and said, have a nice life. Hasta la vista, we don't need you. Folks, I used to know a guy with schizophrenia. The media is saying that, the Detroit News is reporting that he has schizophrenia, and which was why he was stabbing people. Now, thankfully, it was a knife and not a gun. I mean, imagine what would have happened if he had a gun in his hand. You see, folks, what I'm trying to tell you here is this is why we need better health care in America. And when Donald Trump signed his kill bill a few weeks ago, to me, I basically said to myself, Traverse City in northern Michigan, I'm sorry to say this, they did it to themselves. And even worse, there's somebody who even posted on Facebook, let this incident not prevent you from shopping at Walmart. But I got news for you, folks. Walmart played a role in all this because the Walton family has spent a ton of money on making, here's the thing, folks. The Walton family are a bunch of scumbags. And, this is a family who, by the way, it combined, oh my God. Are you ready for this? Combined, the Walton each member of the Walton family combined is worth $432 billion. $432 billion. And they are big donors to the Republican Party bullshit. They are bullies, folks. They bully their employees. They say, well, we don't have enough money to pay our employees a livable wage. Oh, yeah. $432 billion. Are you fucking crazy? Back in the 90s, they wouldn't sell, they forced record companies to only sell the edited versions of albums. Because, we don't want profanity in our music. We don't want to. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, you know something, man? I'm sorry. And I'm like, yeah, they wouldn't sell obscene CDs, the parental advisory stickers. They wouldn't do that. And why wouldn't they do that? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because, oh, we don't want to sell filth. Oh, we don't want to sell that stuff. By the way, I'm looking at this website called Goods Unite Us. Very, very good website, by the way. It's an app, actually. They're almost half and half in terms of political donations. Yeah, they even supported Kamala Harris. Anyway, so what's funny is that, this is a company that won't sell CDs or records with the parental advisory sticker. They will not sell, back in the 90s, I remember they refused to sell private parts, the Howard Stern book. They wanted nothing to do with Howard Stern. And the funny thing was, they sold guns. They were cool with selling guns and bullets and stuff. Yeah, it's like this. It's one of the most hypocritical stores in the history of mankind. And I don't want to hear, oh, we're half and half now, almost half and half, even though they are still slightly more Republican than Democrat. But it doesn't matter to me. I just, I hate Walmart. I've always hated Walmart. I hate people who tell me, hey, can you take me to Walmart? I need to buy stuff at Walmart. And I'm like, no. Yeah, I used to have a friend who, by the way, also had schizophrenia. Years ago, he watched on the news that the price of coffee and toilet paper were going up. So what does he do? He actually calls me up at 5:30 at night. And, I have to be in bed early because of work. And he wanted me to drive him all the way to the nearest Walmart to him, so he could buy coffee and toilet paper. And I'm like, dude, you live across the street from a grocery store. Buy your shit there. I don't like it when people tell me that they want me to support Walmart, and they're part of the reason why this shit happened. All I can say is, I hope people, this will cause some people in Traverse City to actually think instead of coming up with utter bullshit like, don't be afraid to shop at Walmart. Don't be afraid. Oh, yeah. Here's what people really need to do. Shop local or shop somewhere else. Traverse City has, look, folks, Traverse City has a shit ton of stores for a town its size. Seriously. People don't need to go to fucking Walmart. There's a Target across the street at Grand Traverse Mall. There's many locally owned grocery stores, like Tom's and Olson's. Of course, there's also Family Fare, which, of course, the Family Fare in Traverse City, by the way, used to be the old Prevost. And yeah, there's also Meijer. And I'll be honest with you, I think that Meijer is the lesser of the two evils between them and Walmart, because number one, they're a union shop. Number two, at least the member of the Meijer family that was a former congressman, what was his name? But anyway, he actually voted to impeach Trump. And for good reason, because he was damn near killed during the insurrection, resurrection. Yeah, the resurrection of Trump. Well, it was the resurrection of freedom of speech. The resurrection of our country, because, well, I wouldn't call it a resurrection of our country. It was more like, yeah, it was what it was, an insurrection. But, Biden won fair and square. And he fixed this country. I mean, yeah, he wasn't perfect, but better him than Trump. Anyway. But that's what I have to say about that. But another thing, too, is there was a hero in all this. And that man was a fellow by the name of Derek Perry. Derek was, now you've probably seen the video on the news multiple times. Derek Perry was the black man holding a gun at Giles and telling him to drop the weapon, drop the fucking weapon. He was saying that multiple times. So, I want to tell you a sad story. So, Traverse City, unfortunately, is, when I lived up in northern Michigan, I've heard it too many times. I moved up here to get away from the black people in Detroit. And tragically, my parents were two examples. What happened was way back, my parents moved to, northern Michigan in 1977, a year after they married. They lived in a duplex in Detroit. The other people in the duplex were a black family. And they were so black, they actually named their daughter The Lisa. And what happened was they both got laid off from their jobs. And then what happened was my dad's cousin, who, by the way, grew up on a farm, came on down with a trailer and said, load her up. You're moving up north. And, they waited 5 years to have me. And what happened was when I moved up north, not when I moved up north, but when I was born, what was the biggest problem with my upbringing was the lack of diversity in my school. It was all white. Elk Rapids was almost entirely white. Yeah, there were a couple of minorities. There were a couple of folks who were Hispanic because they were all migrants, came from migrant families. There were a couple of Native Americans or people who were partially Native American. And there was also, there was a black kid in my school at one point. And what his story was, he was abandoned by his father. His mom was white, and she and him had to fend for themselves. And what happened was my mom and dad didn't do a good job of telling me that people are people. Because when I moved to Grand Rapids, people knew that I was, this guy from northern Michigan. And, I had a black roommate. He was an asshole. I worked with people at my job, a guy who played the race card and made me do a lot of stuff that he did. He had, that was not my job, but it was his job. And, the list goes on and on. I mean, one time, I told you this story a couple of times. There was a black guy who had me come over to his house, and he started pleasuring himself in front of me. He wanted me to have sex with him. And I said, no, a billion times no. There were a lot of folks out there who were black, who, unfortunately, played race card with me. But you know what? I had to tell myself, it's not entirely how a black person acts, because there are black folks out there who are good people. And my mother's ex-boy, my mother's boyfriend, who shouldn't call him an ex-boyfriend, but technically he kind of still is. But he's got dementia now. He was a great guy. I mean, people are people. You want me to say some bad things about white people? Well, there you go. You got people up in Traverse City who, unfortunately, still like to bash those with mental problems, and they say, well, lock them up, put them in the loony bin. Oh, no. I think what really should happen is people, we have a stigma against people who are, the word is stigma. There's a stigma against black people and people who are different, and there's a stigma regarding people who are, people who do have mental issues. And the biggest problem is, unfortunately, the fact that, look at what happened. I'll tell you something. I want to tell you a little story about a black guy who once visited northern Michigan a long, long time ago. So this guy attended a small country school right here in Michigan. Okay, he was in a town called Brethren, and he was the token black kid in the entire school. But he was smart. He was a straight A student. He did very well. And then what happened was he went up to Traverse City one day. So, actually, first of all, anyway, the boy had a problem. He was mute. Okay, he had a stuttering issue. He never talked at all, hardly at all. So what happened was, one day the teacher had everyone write a poem, and he wrote a poem about grapefruits because there was a bunch of grapefruits that were shipped to his house because of a government surplus. The grapefruits came to his house, and he wrote a poem about how much he loved grapefruits and how tasty they were. And he delivered it perfectly. He aced it. He talked better than I did. Anyway, here's what happened. So, this boy was smart. And the teacher loved him. And he said, son, you need to look past your problems, because he had this stuttering issue. And he told him, join the debate team. And that's what he did. He joined the debate team, and he did a great job. They went from one school to the next, and soon they were in Traverse City. There we go. And guess what happened? While in Traverse City, the teacher took everybody to a nice restaurant. But then what happened was, while at this restaurant, the teacher, so somebody from the restaurant came to Jimmy, as he was sitting down, and the guy said, we do not serve colored people here. And Jimmy was heartbroken. Why him? So what happened was, Jimmy no longer thought of Traverse City as a great place to be. He thought of it as racist. And he had a grudge against Traverse City for the rest of his life, pretty much. So anyway, what happened was, that man, that brilliant man named Jimmy, the man that was refused service in Traverse City some over 75 years ago. The high school kid who was rejected service because of the color of his skin. James Earl Jones. That's right. Traverse City, this Traverse City restaurant refused to serve anything to him because heaven forbid that a black person eat at this restaurant. Because in the mind of so many people in, backwards towns like Traverse City, black people were bad. They were shucking and jiving and stealing and, eating fried chicken and watermelon. That's how people up north thought of black people. And even worse, even well into, even well into at least the 60s, they were still having minstrel shows in Traverse City. Hell, I once worked, I told you this in a previous podcast, I worked at a popular restaurant whose owner's parents once owned another restaurant in town, and they had all these pictures of all the minstrel shows he used to have. And she actually told me, yeah, we used to have them all the time until the damn NAACP told us to knock it off. And I'm like, yeah, they told you to knock it off because that's not how black people act. I mean, it was all bullshit created by white people years ago to get back at black people because slavery ended. And that's what it is, folks. It's bullshit what they did. And I hate to say it, but sometimes I wish I never lived in northern Michigan. Because of the lack of diversity. Yeah, I've had problems with black people, but I've had problems with white people too. I've had problems with certain individual, it's like my ex-boss was a white guy, Hollander, conservative Dutch guy. Didn't give me a raise for 10 years. And the longer I worked at my company, the more I hated it. You see, and not only that, but once you get out, so another problem too was that just north of us, where I grew up in Torch Lake, was Frisky Orchards up in Atwood. They made headlines a few years ago when they announced that they would not allow people to wear masks and they weren't going to practice social distancing or none of that stuff. And it turns out the guy who founded Frisky Orchards, his name was Richard Frisky. Well, a couple of things about him. Number one, he was a congressman back in early 70s, and he was a segregationist. He was actually good pals with George Wallace. He was, not only was he pro-segregationist, but he was also against teaching of sex in schools. And what's even more embarrassing is the fact that his son, Neil, was a former congressman too. And of course, he made headlines because he invited a stripper from Deja Vu to come to his house in Lansing, and he chased her around with a shotgun. It's like, what the fuck are you people thinking? Family values my ass. You want to shut down the strip clubs and porn industry, and yet you're running around chasing strippers with a shotgun. The fuck are you doing? Anyway, so that's what I'm trying to say here. I get so flustered knowing that this is the way the right wing acts. Oh yeah, one more thing about, Richard Frisky, by the way. Get this, he came from Germany. And guess what? He fought with the Nazis in World War II. Why the fuck did he move to America then? He brought his pathetic values with him. And this is the same shit that Trump is supporting. Folks, what's sad is that Northern Michigan and a lot of other folks were duped into thinking that Trump is a good guy. Trump is going to fix inflation and gas prices are going to go down to $1.98. And look at what we got now. We got homeless shelters shutting down. And now we got people like this poor guy who shot up a Walmart, and yeah, Bradford Gille, he did it because his mind is all fucked up. Why? And why? Folks, we'll never know the rest of the story, but it bothers me that, we'll never know the whole story of him, I don't think. I think somebody needs to be responsible for what they did to him all those years ago, because now 11 people were stabbed. Thankfully, they weren't murdered. I don't think he can have a gun, and I hope he never does. Well, of course, he won't have a gun because, he's going to be in jail pretty much for the rest of his life. But I hope that folks, the healthcare system in America is not going to be saved under Trump, by far. What we really need to do is our next president better be a hardcore progressive who will fix this fucking mess. No more corporate Democrats who bow to the wealthy. Let's fix this shit now. People need to know the fucking truth. We need to end the stigma about mental illness, and the same goes with racism. People in Northern Michigan need to be ashamed of themselves for the fact that James Earl Jones was rejected service at a restaurant all those years ago because of the color of his skin. I think Traverse City should do something to honor him because he was a good actor. And and not only that, of course, there was the issue not too long ago with the Traverse City high school kids who did a slave auction. And they bullied all the black kids in their school by doing that. That's sick, folks. And, look, Grand Rapids ain't perfect. No town is perfect. But the reality is, we got to end stigmas, or else another incident like this will happen. The only good news is that at least he didn't have a gun, because if he did, that will be a true tragedy. And I hope that people will listen to this podcast and realize how evil Walmart really is. They don't pay their employees well, and they contribute too much to right-wing causes that prevent good health care. They did it to themselves, folks. They did it to themselves. Good day and good luck, everyone. 'Tis I, your old pal, King Chuck, signing off for right now.